and welcome to the documentary. Now we're here to talk about British cryptids. Now, as you know, there are a lot of alleged cryptids roaming the British Isles. You've got the stagmen, for example, werewolves, dogmen. Now today we're going to be talking about Bigfoot, or, according to legend, the Woodwose. Now I'm next to a town called Burbage, which is in Leicestershire, and this patch of land here has quite a history to it. It's near Burbage Woods, and over the years there's been lots of alleged sightings of the UK Bigfoot, and today we're going to talk about the history behind the legend and do an investigation. And this piece of land, you know, when you always trust your instinct, your intuition, I always get a funny feeling when I come in. You've got this wide expanse of field here, and then all the woods in the background that go on for miles and miles. I don't know if you can see it, but in the far corner over there, there's a creepy old house. But let's get on with this documentary. Let's go down this pathway here that leads to the woods. Now, like I said, we're going to be talking about the UK Bigfoot today. So let's get into it. Let's go to the woods. The Woodwose. So let's talk about a bit of the history surrounding this cryptid, this British cryptid. Now today we're in Burbage Woods, but we'll start way back in 1292 in a place called Cannock Chase Woods. Now back in 1292, the Bishop of Lichfield, he owned the land, you see, and on a particular hunting trip one day, it's quite a large hunting trip, there are about 20 people in total, all on horseback. They were hunting wild boar. In Cannock Chase Woods, similar to what we have here. Now, during this hunting trip, one of the riders spotted a rustling in the nearby bushes in the woodland. He went to investigate, and the horse was so frightened it threw him off the horse. And as he landed, a 7-foot man, creature, covered in hair from head to toe, ran from the woods and attacked him. Now, as his colleagues came to help, the creature ran off into the woods. And that was the first ever recorded sighting of the English wild man, the man of the woods, the Woodwose. You know, coming into these woods alone, you always get the sense you're being watched. Let's go a bit further. It's around 7 p.m. in the UK at the moment. It's end of July, so we've got about, I'd say, an hour and a half left of sunlight. So let's go a bit deeper into these woods. Now, the second story occurred in 1829, again in Cannock Chase Woods. Now, in Cannock Chase Woods, they had old mines. And one particular day, the miners were going about their work, and the mine collapsed. And there are about 6 or 7 of these guys trapped underground, miles underground. Now one of the miners swore blind, that a creature, as they were stuck underground, began to dig a hole next to where they were stuck. And this creature was in some sort of adjoining cavern. And when the hole was punched through, they saw a wild man, a creature. Again, they described it as being over 6 foot tall, covered in hair from head to toe, with piercing eyes. And that was back in 1829, again, in Cannock Chase Woods. Now the third story occurred, again, in Cannock Chase. This was in the 1950s. Now a group of children were out playing near the woods. And they went to a favourite spot, and this favourite spot was a hilltop on the outskirts of the woods. And it was a lovely summer's day, according to the reports, to the newspaper article at the time. Now what these kids found on top of the hilltop was a skull. And not just any skull. This skull resembled a primate. The next day, they took it to their local school, and the headmaster, curious, sent it off to experts. Now these experts came back and said it was a gorilla skull. Well, they couldn't be certain, but it was definitely a primate. So the question is, what was a skull doing, a primate skull doing in the middle of Cannock Chase Woods? Very strange. But that's just one other story. And there are lots and lots of tales. Not just in Cannock Chase, of course, but all over the UK, in Scotland, in Wales. Similar stories are always heard in relation to the Cannock Chase cryptid Bigfoot. So yeah, just to recap, this cryptid, this 8 foot tall creature covered from head to toe in hair, is not just spotted in Cannock Chase, of course, but in, like I said, like Scotland, Wales, but also obviously in Ireland as well. Now the Americans would call it Bigfoot, the Australians would call it Yowie. If you went to Tibet, it'd be called the Yeti. But it's a very similar creature. Could it exist? Well, let's take into account that during the 1920s, the silverback gorilla hadn't been discovered yet. UK Bigfoot sightings are becoming more and more common. Just like the Sasquatch in North America and the Yowie in Australia. Now, one of the most famous sightings happened back in 1982 in Salford. A young girl at the time called Deborah Hatsell, she was only 15 at the time, she's now become one of the UK Bigfoot's most respected researchers. But back then she was a 15-year-old schoolgirl, and she was out with a friend that decided to take a day off school, as you do at that age sometimes. And she was in Buell Park in Salford. Now, as they were walking through the park, Deborah heard a noise in the woods off to her left. She stopped, and as she did, from out of the woods appeared what she now believes was a UK Bigfoot. Woodwose. She described the creature as being around 7 foot in height, covered completely in hair, with a human-like face, but with a protruding brow, protruding lips, and a flattened nose, which is quite a common, as we've already explained, description of the UK Bigfoot. Now the animal looked just as startled to see Deborah as Deborah was to see it. It stood and watched her for about 10 seconds and then disappeared back into the woodland. Now Deborah at the time knew nothing about Bigfoot. She kept this to herself for many, many years before going online in more recent times and doing her own research, trying to find out, what she'd actually seen. And to her surprise, there were lots and lots of people in the Salford area who'd witnessed the same creature, but had kept quiet out of fear of being ridiculed. At that point, Deborah came forward, and like I said, she's now one of the UK's most respected UK Bigfoot researchers. So that was one of the most famous sightings of the creature. But as I said, these sightings are becoming more and more common, just like in North America. But could the country the size of England really have a Bigfoot population? Surely the woodland is just too small, the rural areas. Where are the dead bodies, for example? One day, hopefully, we'll get strong video evidence. At the moment, we only have photos to go on. And not very good ones, to be honest. But the search continues. There are groups up and down the UK who are committed to finding the UK Bigfoot. They go out and leave trail cams, they camp out, all in the hope that one day they'll capture that elusive video, that photo, that'll prove once and for all that the UK Bigfoot actually exists. But until then, it's just myth and legend. Random eyewitness accounts, folklore. Does the UK Bigfoot exist? Is the Woodwose a real thing? Or just a tale passed down from one generation to the next? So what we'll do first, we'll go a little bit deeper into the woods and we'll go and look for some strange tree formations. Now this looks like it was man-made, obviously. But what we're looking for, what the reports generally say is, it's usually like twisted branches, twisted tree trunks. And people can't explain how that comes about. You know, in the middle of the wilderness, how do, huge tree trunks get twisted around one another? Some people say it could be snowfall, heavy snowfall. Other people say that it's, like storms, for example, which is fair enough, that could be the case. But some of these formations, what people have found in places like the UK, in woods just like this, they've found actual trees turned upside down with the roots showing at the top. So how is that possible? So if you imagine a giant tree that's been turned upside down with the roots at the top, that's very strange, isn't it? What could cause that? And of course that's not just in the UK, that's all over the world, like where they find Bigfoot, for example. It's a common theme. What Bigfoot experts are suggesting is these formations, like what we have here, for example, where trees have been crossed in what we can only describe as like an X shape. So the Bigfoot is leaving those as signals to its group, messages. That's one explanation. Let's go deeper. Now, Bigfoots are expert at keeping hidden. And people who have had experiences with Bigfoot often say they sense these creatures before they actually see them, leading some to believe they have supernatural powers, abilities. So whenever I come into these woods, I always keep a close eye out for anything unusual, because you never know what could be watching you. Now, along with strange tree formations, what else is the Bigfoot known for? Well, strange vocalizations. So when these people, these experts talk about vocalizations, what do they mean? Some people who've come across Bigfoot in the UK have described hearing like a strange whooping sound. It's like no other sound they've heard. It's not a fox, it's not a cat, it's not a dog. And these sounds, they're described by people from all over the world, in fact. All very similar tales, all very a similar description. A very strange, loud, piercing, whooping sound. Could it be the Woodwose? And could the Woodwose be the green man of the woods, which is prevalent in UK mythology? Could the Woodwose be Nephilim, as described in the Bible. What are these strange creatures people are seeing? Because they're spotted in the UK on a regular basis. In rural areas and woods like this, when people least expect, when they're not looking for anything. And like I said, these creatures are masters at hiding and tracking. Some people describe, after they've seen these creatures, strange claw marks over tree branches and tree trunks. What could be causing that? Could be wild cats. Could it be domestic dogs? All very strange. It's starting to get a little bit darker now. I think we should start heading back soon. So as we begin to head back, we'll talk a little bit more about the UK Bigfoot and what it could be. Of course, it's not just Bigfoot that's said to be sighted in the UK every year. There are reports of werewolves, stagmen, giant black dogs, big cats, and even dragons are reported to be seen each year in the UK. The field of cryptozoology is certainly a fascinating subject. As I mentioned before, people say it's impossible that a creature the size of a Bigfoot, a giant ape, can possibly be living in the rural areas of the UK. Keep in mind, it wasn't until the 1850s until we first discovered the gorilla in Africa. Before then, for hundreds and hundreds of years, these rumours of a giant ape-like creature living in the jungles of Africa were put down to just mythology and folklore, tall tales told by tribesmen, passed down from generation to the next. And like I said, it wasn't until the 1850s when we first started to discover gorilla skulls, and then we had our first sighting, that the truth became apparent. Now, I'm not saying that the UK Bigfoot exists, but it's always an idea to keep an open mind. Like I said, the reports keep coming in year after year, and the descriptions of these creatures stay consistent. So what are the main differences between the American Bigfoot and the UK Bigfoot, or Woodwose? Well, mostly it's in their appearance. So the American Bigfoot, for example, is often described as having a sagittal crest, and that gives it its head that cone-like appearance, similar to the gorilla in Africa. Now the UK Bigfoot is different. It's described as being more human-like, with more of a chimpanzee type face, a flat nose, protruding lips and brow. The only inconsistency in the UK Bigfoot's descriptions tends to be in the colour of his hair. It is covered in hair from head to toe, but sometimes they're described as having black hair or reddish hair, like the orangutan, light brown, and in some rare reports, the UK Bigfoot is described as being completely white. Also, the size of these creatures tends to differ. Whereas in North America, for example, and in Australia, they're described as being around about, sometimes 8 foot or even taller. But the UK Bigfoot is different. They're mostly reported as being no bigger than 6 foot, 7 foot at the most. So what other stories are associated with the Woodwose or the UK Bigfoot? Well, through the centuries, the same reports have been passed down. They're all very similar, as well as strange vocalizations, strange tree formations in the woods. People have also reported rock throwing or stone throwing. It's a common theme. Going right back to 1292 with the first reported sighting of the Woodwose. People hear a strange whooping sound. They uncover strange tree formations in the woods. Sometimes they're attacked, sometimes they have rocks thrown at them, stones thrown at them. The Bigfoot, the UK Bigfoot, very rarely attacks somebody. It's almost like they're warning people just to stay away. You keep yourself to yourselves and we'll leave you alone. Of course, when people get too close, or maybe their young's involved, they might very well attack. As any primate would. But could such a creature exist in the UK? We're a small island. Well, people say these creatures are experts at keeping hidden. Could even be supernatural entities. And the sightings keep happening year after year. As they do all across the globe. And it's always the same creature described. Between 8 and 12 foot, covered in hair from head to toe. Strange vocalizations, strange tree formations, rock throwing. A bit too much coincidence? Or people just regurgitating the same old story? Chinese whispers. Whatever the truth, the legend of the English Woodwose is certainly a fascinating one. It goes back centuries and centuries. If you go to your local church, you'll find carvings of woodmen, wild woodmen. You'll see them engraved into the church stone above the doorways. So the summer's coming to an end here in the UK. It's the end of July. It starts to get cooler. So what do we think? Fact or fiction? Does the Woodwose exist? Or is it just a fanciful tale passed down from generation to generation, embellished by people, as people like to do? Or could there be a primate of some sort, wandering the forests and woodlands of the English countryside? Maybe one day someone will stumble across one of these creatures and get hard video evidence. Maybe even a dead body. But until then, we can only speculate. But whenever you're out and about in the countryside on your own, always keep a lookout. Because you never know what could be watching you.